presentation, let's welcome Gunnery Sergeant Brad Colbert. Where is he? Behind me. Okay.
All right, good morning. I know we've got lunch on the mind, so I will keep this brief. All right. Today we're going to talk about hooked on adrenaline or managing adrenaline. A lot of the classes that you have had today, a lot of the speakers' subject matter will dovetail nicely with what I have to say, and some of it will overlap, but it comes at it from a slightly different approach, so I'll try not to be repetitive. I like to open this with a question, and the judge absolutely hates my question, and that's it's a question on speeding tickets. So show of hands, how many of you have had a speeding ticket before? Yeah, almost everyone. All right. How many of you have had 5 speeding tickets or less? Okay, slightly less hands. 10 speeding tickets or less. 15. 20. Has anyone had 25 speeding tickets or less? All right. If you are, don't forget meetings are every Wednesday night. See my hand still up. 28 speeding tickets, 5 suspended licenses. That's not a record that I want anyone to try and top, by the way, okay? I'd like to be the only one that keeps that record going. So that's my little personal story. For me, the rush of speed is my adrenaline. It's what keeps me fed, and it's something that I've had to deal with for most of my life. And it's been a burden on me financially, as it is to those of you who may have experienced the loss of a driving privilege on or off post, right? Because now you're beholden on your spouse or friends or loved ones to take you to work. It's financially expensive to have to pay the tickets. You won't believe how much money I've had to shell out in speeding fines. All right, one ticket alone was $1,200. Yeah, 125 and a 65. Don't do it. It's also the burden on your unit because you have to leave to go to court. You may not be able to get a ride to work, so you may not even be there on some days, depending on if you have a spouse to take you. So there's a lot of second and third order effects from some of these poor decisions. So adrenaline is something that I know we've all experienced at one point in time. We've had a lot of anecdotes that are traffic related, and here's another one. When you're in traffic and the person in front of you suddenly slams on their brakes and you bury the brake pedal to the floorboard, what you feel as that takes place is an adrenaline rush. You feel that rush wash over you, your heart rate increases, your respiration increases, you feel your goosebumps start to flush. That's adrenaline. A lot of us go to the movie theater to try and watch movies that give us that same sensation, right? That shock, that surprise, that's an adrenaline rush. So there's a couple of different things that take place physiologically during an adrenaline rush, and I'm not going to get into a long discussion. We're just going to hit the wave tops. But basically, you have 2 supportive yet competing systems. You have the sympathetic nervous system, and you have the parasympathetic nervous system. And within the sympathetic nervous system, there's 2 key players. One is epinephrine, and one is norepinephrine. And epinephrine is more commonly referred to as adrenaline. And norepinephrine is adrenaline's designated driver. So stress throws a party, and adrenaline shows up. He likes to drink. Okay, he does a couple of different things to our body. Slows down our metabolism, slows down our digestive system, opens up the bronchiole to make sure that we have increased respiration, visual acuity, hearing acuity. For any of you who have experienced a flashback before, you may recognize some of those physiological changes. Respiration starts to increase, muscles tense. You become extremely focused at the task at hand. Along with adrenaline, as I mentioned, is norepinephrine, which is adrenaline's drunk driver. So when the party's over, it's norepinephrine's job to drive the adrenaline home safely and put him to bed. Now, after the party is over and adrenaline has gone home, it's the parasympathetic's job to do the cleanup. They cause the body to relax, increase our hunger, slow ourselves down. So I know that at some point we've all experienced the adrenaline rush, whether it's from combat or from a marathon argument with a spouse. At the end of it, you feel drained. You're wiped out. You're ready for a nap. You're probably pretty hungry. And that's brought about by the parasympathetic nervous system. Stress brings about an adrenaline reaction, but not all stress causes it. Normal stress is healthy in our lives. It's actually what keeps us operating at peak capacity. As an athlete, the stress of competition is what ensures that when we show up game day, we got our game face on. Prior to leaving the wire, stress of the unknown is what heightens us up and focuses us for a combat operation. So stress can be a very good thing. If you've got a test the next day, it's that stress that makes you sit down, open the books, study, and prepare for the assignment. Without stress of some kind, we wouldn't be performing as well as we do. The problem occurs is when a spike in stress is happening over and over and over again, and we get an imbalance in that sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, where we're not able to downshift from a constant adrenaline ride. As I mentioned, stress is not always a bad thing, but when we're not able to downshift and it starts to cause problems, then it is a problem. If you are able to interact throughout your entire daily life with a healthy level of stress, and it's not causing any second or third order effects, it's not impacting your loved ones, it's not impacting your work, great, you're fine. Keep it up. But if you incur repetitive and long periods of stress that puts you in a constant, keyed up, alert, sympathetic nervous system state, that might be something you want to take a look at. It's something that you want to be aware of. So some of the signs and symptoms that you may be in that constant keyed up state, the first one is those around you. As leaders, we're charged with being aware of the Marines and sailors underneath us. But how familiar are you really with the ones that you're put in charge of? Are you able to recognize a change in signs and symptoms, behavior patterns? If you have a loved one or a family member or even a friend or coworker give you a Whiskey Tango Foxtrot, what's going on with you today? Somebody who knows you well enough to be able to say that should be taken at face value, and the chances are that there may be some reason why they're pulling you aside and saying, this is not you. You know, as a Marine diver, one of the things that the dive supervisor says every dive brief prior to the dive is make a mental note of how you feel, and if you feel any different after the dive, you need to let somebody know. We do a really good job before deployment of mapping our cognitive baseline. In the event that you receive a traumatic brain injury, you can come back to the United States. They'll run you through another series of tests, and they'll be able to see a change in your patterns, in your mental patterns. But there's no test that we have to map your emotional baseline before and after a crisis. So you are going to have to rely on friends and loved ones and be brave enough to take their advice when they say, I'm recognizing a change in you. Increased irritability and anger is a good indicator. I know for me, when I got back from every deployment, I'm changed a little bit for the better and a little bit for the worse. I'm changed for the better because I think I'm more appreciative of the things that I have. I think I'm more appreciative of the friends and the family that I have in my life. But I'm also changed for the worse because I lose patience much more quickly than I did prior to the deployment, for a whole host of reasons, and I think a lot of you can identify it. I get keyed up at the line at the bank on a payday. If I'm standing in line at Navy Federal, I just want to go MMA on everybody so that I can get to the front of the line. It's the same way in traffic. I'm horrible in traffic now, and I didn't used to be that way. So I have to mentally and constantly remind myself that it's okay, I'm going to get there, and try not to let that stress elevate me to the point where I'm making an irrational decision. Extreme sports. There's a sport for everything these days. I just found out that gambling is a sport. I didn't know that. But yeah, an extreme sport, perhaps not. But there's always outlets for some of these behaviors that keep you constantly keyed up. You want to just be aware of those if you're engaging in riskier and riskier activities, it may be a sign that you need to key it down a bit. Increase fighting with your friends, your family members, even strangers. You know, I'm not the type of person who would normally snap at a complete stranger at the post office, but there have been days where I've just wanted to wring the guy's neck in front of me as he calmly and coolly mails 40 envelopes, one at a time, address, return address, and postage. Like, I've got a lunch break of 20 minutes. You need to hurry up or I'm going to kill you. And children, if the things that used to find cute about your loved ones are now driving you crazy, if you can't find the time to spend after coming home from a long day at work with your children, where you used to be able to play with them quite easily, that's a real good sign and symptom, especially one that's recognizable in others. If they're saying, "Daddy, you don't have time for me anymore," well, what happened? Why don't you have time for them anymore? Increasingly risky behaviors despite knowing the consequences. I spoke at the beginning about my personal driving record, and it's not something that I'm proud of. I've since made, I'd like to say, a full recovery. I only speed some of the time now. Risky behaviors such as driving while intoxicated, or driving at excessive high rates of speed, or just taking risks in traffic. You know, I've got 2 high-performance motorcycles that are my babies. All right? I now make sure that they do not see the high side of 65. And I can find my high-speed driving to the track because I know that's the safest place for it. Pornography. I'm not going to browbeat anybody about pornography. It's a natural outlet. But if it's consuming much of your free time, if on your drive home you're looking forward to booting up the computer and finding something that you wouldn't share with your mother, that may be a problem. And it's just something to be aware of. Spending habits. If you find yourself engaging in retail therapy, it's maybe something that you're doing to try and get the adrenaline rush of purchases. If you're making large purchases, if you've maxed out credit cards that you didn't think you'd ever max out, that's a sign and symptom. And your wife or significant other will do it too. When she borrows the credit card because she's had a rough day and she wants to go out and buy high heels, she's doing the same thing you are. She just looks better in high heels than you do. Anything that's consistent with the signs and symptoms of post-traumatic stress syndrome may be an indicator that you are riding an adrenaline high or trying to feed your adrenaline high with risky behaviors. So if you're hypervigilant, if you are quick to startle, if you are irritable, there's not anything that's necessarily wrong with that if you may be having a bad day. But if it becomes a trend, if this is a change in behavior for you, then that's a possible red flag. Disturbed sleep. If your sleeping patterns are making rapid changes, if you used to be a 6 to 7 hour a night guy and you're now sleeping 12, you got to tell me your secret, 1, because I can't do that. And 2, that's a good sign and symptom. Eating habits, sleeping habits, those are big ones for combat stress. Those are big ones for adrenaline highs. And then changes in frequency and the quality of your video games or your computer games. I mean, I'm a video gamer. I love my Xbox. I'm working my way through Fallout New Vegas. If anyone's finished it, see me afterwards. I need some help. But if you usually find yourself in a particular genre and you've switched gears and you are engaged in a style of video game that's not what you're used to, or it is consuming the majority of your free time at the expense of work, what you're doing is you're looking for an escape. You're looking for an outlet. You're looking for a way to dump some of this adrenaline, and the game provides that for you. So, after you've recognized some of the signs and symptoms, what are some of the things that we can do about it? Well, first and foremost, you need to be able to recognize it. And if you can't recognize it in yourself, if you're not that self-aware, then you need to be strong enough to accept the criticisms of those that do. Whether it's a coworker, if you're single, whether it's a good friend, either civilian or active duty, perhaps a parent, but for most of us, it's going to be our significant other, the one that we spend the majority amount of the time with, the one that we share our bed together with. Take the advice of them if they say that there is something different about you that they can't quite put their finger on. And when I got back from Iraq, one of the things that my father said to me is, "You just seem a little off. Is everything okay?" I felt fine. I couldn't recognize what it was that he was talking about in me. But he said, I can't put my finger on it. You just seem a little different. You seem really keyed up. And he was right, I was. And it took several months of being back